Just going to give it another minute or two as we get people logging in here. But thank you for taking the time to come to this today. I was talking to the OFC at the BC trade show, and they did another follow-up asking me to just touch base with all our clients and users about the reporting process. So that's what we're going to do today. Obviously, if you have any questions about anything as we go, please feel free to put your hand up, put in a note, and this is also we're gonna make a recording of this available if other people would like to see it, or I'm also going to be sending out a general guide to this process as well. So should be some support documentation available in addition to the session today. We've still got people coming on in. Okay. Okay, great. If I see any more people in the waiting room, I'll bring them in, but we're booked to start around 2, so I think now's a good time. I want to welcome everybody, people from across the province, so that's great. What I'm going to be doing today is going over the entire process of doing BC report submissions from the point where you are flagging incidents for submission to the province, all the way through several different ways to create the provincial submission files. And that's also going to include flagging and sending any historical submissions. Challenges with your audio. You seem to be on as far as I can tell. Might be worth checking to see if you've got your Zoom is allowed to use the right audio. But feel free to chat messages to me if you're not able to talk. So we should see a copy of FirePro up on people's screens. So we're going to start with just the general process of flagging an incident for submission to the province, look at the validation system, the process for generating BC report numbers. And again, if anybody has any questions, wants me to stop or slow down or recover something, please just either put your hand up in Zoom or feel free to say anything or put a note in the chat. So when I am in an incident report in the province of British Columbia, I have taken the liberty of pre-generating an incident report here. There's going to be a variety of ways in FirePro that you might start the reports initially. Those are going to be things like incident importing from dispatch, creating your own incidents manually. So let's just make sure this is opened large enough we can all see it. Okay, so when I create an incident report in the system, any incident report, the program is going to default the incident report OFC status to unreportable. That's the standard default selection because most incidents are not reportable to the province. At this point, what we've done is set it up so that in order to start a provincial submission, you have to pick one of the OFC statuses. Based on some conversations we've had with the OFC, we are going to be adjusting that going forward. So the system is going to be automatically prompting you to flag an OFC status if you pick one of the fire response types in here. That is something that is not implemented yet, but it will be in the future. So at the moment, if you have an incident that you want to report to the province, generally my understanding is that that includes any kind of fire. what you need to do is in this OFC status dropdown, pick one of the OFC status types. This is going to generate a different OFC form depending on which of these options you select. As soon as you do select an OFC status, and as soon as you save the incident, what's going to happen is that the program will automatically generate a provincial number for you. We can see that in the top left-hand corner, and that's going to be based on your department code and the date time of the call. And it's also going to populate what we call the validation tab. So the validation tab is going to include, in many cases, a whole bunch of mandatory information about what kind of stuff you have to enter into this call to submit it to the province. It's also going to populate a more info tab, and the more info tab will be pre-populated with all the standard forms and codes for the OFC status type that you've selected. So pretty much your provincial form for that type of call will automatically be put into the more info tab for you, and the validation system will show what information from that tab and from various other places that you need to fill out. If you are filling out most provincial forms, you're going to be required to have at least one entry in the names tab. So again, you can just use the green plus button to create a new names record. And that's normally going to be including something like owner information with owner name and address. This is the place where you can put in dollar loss. You can also indicate if the person in question was a casualty. And in that event, you have additional form information for casualty record. You do require at least one names record for any provincial submission. The system will also tell you right away when you finish filling out one of these names records if the submission is complete or not, and it's normally going to give you some information if there's something that's mandatory that's missing. So the more info tab is going to be somewhat dependent on the type of OFC status information that you select, but normally you're going to be putting in the address of the call. Potentially, if there's a vehicle involved, the make, model, serial number is going to go in here. If you're dealing with a vehicle indicated response type, generally, there's going to be a bit more information related to owner-operator, additional vehicles that might have been involved, which can include owner-operator, vehicle information, additional insurance. There can be a fair bit of detail there. But for a standard structure, your information tends to be, I'll have to just resave that, more along the lines of standard information about the property. Again, these are all the standard forms and codes that you might see when you're filling an incident out on the provincial website. You also need to fill out in the notes section at least some officer remarks. And in the author status section, you need to select a report author and provide a report author phone number. This is where when we look at well, I'll go to that in a second. We'll just clear that out and come back here in just a moment. When we look at a personnel record, under the officer tab, this is what where we're populating incident author information. And if you put a phone number and author name in here, then it will automatically populate when you identify who the author is. Normally, this is going to be the person who is submitting or the person of contact when the incident is submitted to the province. So once I complete an incident while I'm filling it out in FirePro, as soon as I complete it, the system will prompt me right away. Do I want to create the file to be sent to the fire commissioner? If I hit yes, it's going to ask you to browse. You can pick the location where you want those files to be sent or saved. And then when it asks you if you want to mark the record as sent, if I'm planning to upload right away, I will say yes. It's going to remind me exactly where I put the files and what those files are called. And I can print a summary if you want, although normally printing a summary for a single record's not helpful. I'll show where the summary can be useful. The system will automatically then flag the date that this was transferred. It is important to remember that this transfer date deals with the date that the transfer files were created, and doesn't assume, or assumes, that you're going to upload them, but we can't prove that because that's the next step here. So it will record that information. Now, once you've got the submission files created, and we're going to see the submission files, each submission that you create will generate 2 different files for you. And we'll just get rid of the duplicated ones here, because I did one for testing earlier. So it's going to create 2 files for you, a names and a report file. You can see that right in the file name. It's also going to have a timestamp related to when they were created. So once I've got those files, I have access to the test side of the provincial fire reporting system. But when you go into the OFC site, let's go back there, and you hit the fire incident reporting button at the top, there's an option for fire report upload. So the fire report upload, there's a fire report upload option right at the top here, and that will take you into this data upload window. In your accounts, there will only be one fire department in here, which would be yours, that's tied to your OFC account. And it's going to ask you for a fire report and additional names files. So if we use the choose file option and we go into our documents OFC, we have report, which is the one that you select for the fire report. And we have names, which is the one that we select for the names section. So once you've got those 2 selected, you just hit the upload button. It's going to give you an upload in progress. This is the test site, and I didn't work particularly hard in making sure that these were actually submittable, but you will immediately see results from your upload. So in this case, we can see that there's some location code and address issues. You can always reference this with the upload log. If you get any error messages like this, you can contact us directly. We can help you out making sure that your incidents submissions are correct. But generally speaking, the standard forms are normally fairly well pre-populated in the system. So this is going to just automatically upload and submit any incidents that you generated. And this is designed to happen as soon as the incident is created. That being said, there are other ways to do a provincial submission. In this case, if you have an older provincial submission that has not actually been sent to the Office of the Fire Commissioner yet, then what you can do is use this gold button up at the top of the incident window called Create BC Transmission Files. This will look for any incident that's in the system that's flagged as was supposed to be sent to the province, but has not been sent yet. And it normally is going to ask for a cutoff date, because often departments might do this potentially on a monthly basis or something like that. In this case, I'm going to put the cutoff date is the 15th of this month. That system will go through any historical records, and if you create the files to send, it'll send a single submission with every single historical record that needs to be submitted all at the same time. So it generates a batch as opposed to having to do them one at a time. And again, if you do think you might have historical records, or the OFC has indicated that there's fire calls that you need to submit to them, then absolutely get in touch with us. We can schedule a session and go through this on your actual data to make sure that those are all submitted. Once you do submit those, though, they're going to come off the list of active incidents that need to be sent. Again, you will need to upload the files to the OFC site when that's completed. But once that's done, your historical backlog that might be there is submitted and uploaded, and you should get immediate feedback from the OFC site on it.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
I was looking for my hand raised option in Zoom, and I couldn't find it
didn't
quickly. So Kelly Belfer from Campbell River. Just a quick question there. You did one quick thing that I saw you do, but you didn't speak to it. And I'm just curious, that was one of the questions I had. If you can go back to the incident,
Sure.
And then you generated the report. Yep. And you had the transfer window there on the No, should be
Yeah.
there. Author, I understand on the June 14th, 2023 at 14:14:06, you created the file. That makes sense. Then there's that little tick box for the transfer. You went and manually ticked that and then went and checked the box. What's the significance of doing that?
So what happens with this transfer box is that if you select one of the OFC statuses on an incident, the transfer box will be turned on automatically. And that's basically to indicate the next time I do a submission, I want you to send this to the province. And then as soon as you do, in fact, send it to the province, or at least create the files to send to the province. So in this case, I'll say send, yes, save them. When I mark the records it's sent, the system will automatically turn off that transfer flag and identify that it has been transferred. So basically the transfer flag is just an indicator that you and the system can use to say, is this incident queued to be sent to the province? This does give you the ability, if you need to manually turn that transfer flag back on if you want to resubmit for some reason. If you make any changes to an incident that are reportable, the software will automatically prompt you, do you want to resend this to the province? And if you say yes, it'll turn that transfer flag back on for you to send.
Okay, I've been in the habit of simply making one little change in the note, like I had a space in the notes section, and that prompts me then to give the green check mark. I hit the button and it asks me to generate a new tab. This is another way to do that, essentially.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's a manual way to do it.
So if you had multiple calls that you needed to send in, you could check that box, the transfer box on call 1, check the transfer box on call 2, check the transfer box on call 3, and then when it asks you to generate the file, it will generate one file with all 3 calls, or does it generate 3 separate files?
It'll generate one file with all 3 calls on it.
Okay, and then it's presumably it'll generate one name file with multiple names in it as well.
That's right. Yeah. And they're all tied together by the OFC reference number. Now, the other thing that you can do, which is slightly faster than going through multiple incidents and just ticking off the transfer flag, is that in the maintenance menu at the top, there's an option called data updates. And in data updates, there's a couple of options that relate to sending incidents to the OFC. The top one is add incidents to next electronic transmission. What this lets you do is pick an entire date range and automatically flag them all to be transferred. So you could say every incident from last year, I want to turn on the transfer flag for, essentially. Likewise, if you have a bunch of really old incidents, which you know have already been manually uploaded, you can use this maintenance data updates, remove incidents from next electronic transmission, pick a date range, and that will flag them as having already been sent by batch turning off the transfer flag. So that gives you an option for doing large scale changes to incident submission without having to go through each individual incident if you don't want to.
Thank you very much for that. We, as a rule, send up one call at a time. And my question is, the manual way you've just shown us, that is the proper way to do that. There is no other click a button and it all happens in the background situation. Is that true?
Yeah, there is not. The OFM submission site doesn't have a system.
A conduit pipeline.
Yeah, they don't have a pipeline for anything except FDM, which is, I think, not going to work out great for them in the long run. I've been continually asking for a more automated option there. At this point, there isn't one, but as soon as they make something available, we will absolutely be hooking into it to make this process easier and faster for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Ooh. All right, I had a couple people in the waiting room that I didn't notice about. So my apologies. If anybody missed part of that, wants me to go over it again, I absolutely can and will.
Jeremy, this is Tara here from North Cowichan Fire Department.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering, are there permission levels? Like, we have all of our firefighters as incident authors, but we might not necessarily want them to do that transfer submission for review with higher ranks before it goes to the OFC. Is that a setting that we can say that they cannot do the transfer?
Yeah, so by default on all user profiles, the ability to do the transfer is turned off. If you want a user to be like the administrator level user can always do the OFC transfer. But if you want to either turn on or make sure that it's turned off in a standard user profile, under the other tab, there's a tick box here called Run OFC Transfer. And this controls whether the user can do batch OFC transfers or generate the individual transfer file when their incident is completed.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Dave.
Dave Keever calling. I just have a couple of things. In the past, I have a couple of ones that I've actually done manually through the OFC because I couldn't get the green flag. And one was caused by a no property record. And these are to do with vehicle fires. And the other one was content loss value. And because I didn't have that, that's what the system was flagging me why they I couldn't get the green flag to proceed.
Yeah, those were both bugs and should be resolved if you install the most recent version.
Okay.
Yep. Basically, you should just need to have an address in here. Historically, for particular types of calls, we've asked that it be attached to an individual property record in FirePro, but as long as you have a physical address here, you're fine. And that issue with building and contents dollar loss being incorrectly flagged should be resolved. So yeah, that's that stuff that was pointed out for sure.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else with any questions, follow-ups? I know I did leave a couple people sitting in the waiting room, so I'm happy to run through this process one more time if anybody wants me to.
Is there any specific IT requirements that we have to have through our municipal server network connections? Or is this like pretty much like plug and play, go and it's done?
Pretty much plug and play. The only thing that might be a bit strange is that for those of you who are using FirePro through a remote desktop tool, the files will be saved somewhere on the remote desktop end. So usually you'd want to have either the ability to access a shared network drive folder from your own computer, or potentially what you can do sometimes is just put the files on the desktop of the remote desktop and then copy paste them across to your own desktop before you submit them. That's the main thing that might cause some variation in this process, but otherwise it just requires the ability to create records and the ability to access a web browser, and those are pretty standard for everybody. Okay. And just to talk a little bit about our plans going forward, based on the discussions that we've had with the OFC, they're very keen on trying to get files to be at least prompted for submission automatically. I think part of the issue that we've had historically is that because the system defaults to unreportable, it's not pulling you automatically into this OFC status queue. So what I expect we're going to be doing is that certain classes of response type are automatically going to be prompting you to select an OFC status. And then once you do, that'll take you through this standard process. But that'll be done through a FirePro update, and there'll be some documentation and heads up on there. Also, the recent changes related to some of the reporting codes for electrical vehicles, charging stations, stuff like that. We are going to be adding those codes to the forms in the next software update. So that should be coming out for you shortly. All right. So that's all I have. So if you've gotten what you wanted out of the session, then please feel free to log off and go. I was going to say enjoy the afternoon, but it's not great when here. But otherwise, any questions, follow-ups, things like that, I'm always happy to book stuff. Yep, Kelly's got his hand up again. Oh, that's
No, I was waving goodbye and thank you very much for your time. That was very helpful. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Glad to help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So if anybody would like to have me run through the entire process again for whatever reason, feel free to go off mute and just ask me to do that.
Yes, please. It's Gabrielle from Pemberton Fire Rescue. I had some challenges with my audio.
Yeah, and then I didn't actually know that you could do like batch transfers. So yeah.
You want me to walk through the
interesting.
back?
So if I look in FirePro under the incidents for like everything up to today to be transmitted,
Yep.
There's 38 calls in there. So I'm wondering if those.
So usually what you want to think about there is
Oh, so
whether,
it's actually the opposite, that it's to transfer.
yes, those are ones that
Yeah.
had been transferred. But
Yeah.
if you look at a longer time period, if you're looking for ones that have been sent to the OFC, then you can always say, look at my all dates and then filter, sort by transferred date. But yeah, what I would say in that particular case is you may want to decide, like sometimes checking the OFC site to see if those files are there. Somebody might have entered them manually.
That is a good question.
Although ultimately it doesn't cause any problems, generally speaking, to resubmit an incident that's already on their site.
Okay.
Because it's just going to overwrite it with
that
exactly
that training, like if you're busy, we can just call you if we need to. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Sure.
no problem whatsoever.
They have plans for other training at 6, so we have to keep it to the 1 hour.
Sure.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Yeah, like I have no idea what they know and what they don't. So
yeah. So and again, feel free to call if you have questions about it. I'm happy to walk through on a per department basis. So Gabrielle, you'd like to go through this one more time as well?
I mean, I can join in next week as well if it's a problem, but
no, I've got a few here, so it's no problem at all. So when you are doing an incident submission or when you're creating an incident report, the first thing that's going to happen is that when you, and I'll just clear this so we see it, when you create a standard incident in the system, it will automatically flag the OFC status as unreportable, and it will have a clear provincial number. If it is a fire and it is supposed to be submitted to the province, then what you do is you select one of the options from the OFC status dropdown. As soon as you select one of those and save it, the system will automatically do several things for you. So it will generate a provincial number. It will populate a more info tab with all the forms and codes that you need for that kind of provincial submission. And it will start you into what we call the validation process. What happens with the validation process is that the validation tab will show any mandatory information that you have to fill out to complete this incident for the province. As soon as all the validation items are done, you will automatically be prompted to create a submission file that you can use to upload to the province. Broadly speaking, when you are generating a provincial submission or doing a provincial submission through FirePro, you're going to need your standard information related to times, apparatus, personnel. You need at least one entry in the names tab. So if we double click on that, we're going to see some name information here. This is usually the name of someone related to the call, and that can include and generally does include dollar loss information. You will also need to fill out the more info tab, including a fair bit of information here. Usually what's going to happen is as you start to fill out the more information tab, the validation tab will give you a very detailed breakdown of all the mandatory stuff that you have to fill out. But a good rule of thumb is put it in the, if there's a code field in the more info tab, you probably need it. You will also need to have at least some entry in the officer remarks. And in the author status tab, you'll need to select a report author, and that does need to include a contact phone number for that person. This will also automatically turn on the transfer flag, which indicates that this incident is queued to be sent to the province. As soon as I save this with everything done in the validation, it's going to ask me right away, do I want to create the file to be sent to the fire commissioner? If I hit yes, it's going to ask me to select a folder where the files are going to be saved. And it asks me if I want to mark the records as sent. Normally you want to say yes there. If you say yes, what it will do is turn off the transfer flag to indicate that the files have been created and record the date of the transfer in here. Now, in order to fully upload these to the province, what you have to do after you've created the files in FirePro is go to the location where the files were created. I'm just going to get rid of some of these old ones. Go to the location where the files were created. You're going to see a name and a report file. These might contain one incident if we've done it directly from a single incident report. There is also a batch submission option through this gold button that will generate multiple submissions in the same file. But once I have those two files, what I'm going to want to do is log into the OFC fire system and click on the fire incident reporting icon. And the option here is fire report upload. So I can select fire report upload. It is going to pre-select your fire department for you. And you're going to choose for the fire report file, report, and for the additional names, name. We tried to make it pretty straightforward. And you hit the upload button. It will give you, ideally, it will say success. Yes, everything is fine. If there's problems, it will give you these error messages. It's a good idea if you get anything like this to grab the update of the upload log to help us troubleshoot exactly what the problem with that might have been. This is helping you with this. Submission's all part of the FirePro service and support side of things. So you just want to get in touch with us in that. Sometimes the problems are fairly obvious. If there are issues, say, this code is invalid for this response type or something like that, then you can go back into FirePro, make the change directly on the incident. As soon as you make that change, it's going to be asking you, do you want to resend this to the province? So usually looks a bit like that, and send it to the fire commissioner. Again, you can then re-upload the files directly the same way. You can always use this transfer tick box to manually either exclude or include an incident in the submission. There are times when you might not want to transfer a file. Usually the most common reason there is that you've already manually created it on the provincial site. Alternatively, if you wanted to do a batch submission, you can do that from the incident list window, where you can hit this red create BC transmission files icon, or gold transmission files icon. This will allow you to pick a cutoff date. Anything that's valid to be sent before that date will be included, and this will potentially create a batch submission file for multiple incidents all at the same time. So that is another option. If you want to look for incidents that are flagged to be transmitted but have not been, then on the incident window, you can search with the to be transmitted flag, which will show you, that search will show you any incident that is flagged to be sent to the province, but which has not been sent. If you do have an incident that you're still working on, but you haven't filled out everything yet, then that incident will show with a validation flag as red. And when you look at it in the response list, it will show as red, indicating that it's a provincially reportable call that has not yet been sent to the province. Any questions on any of that? Okay, great. As usual, if you have any follow-up questions, anything else, we're going to be offering another session of this next week and possibly another after that, depending on whether people are interested. If you need any general assistance with anything related to the submissions for FirePro, just drop us an email and we'll get you set up. Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. And as usual, just let us know if you need anything else. Great. Thanks all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jeremy.